doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.
So I know, Frannie, that's been part of your basic existence for many years, public sector, private sector, the institutional investment community. But listening to what Marc-Andre said, how would you draw a distinction or complement that with your, when you chaired that panel for the G20 on the capital adequacy reforms at the MDBs?
Well, thank you, Hubert, and it's a pleasure to be here once again. You always organize these amazing events, so thank you for inviting me. We were created as a panel under the G20 presidency of Italy because there was a recognition that all the things we're talking about here need huge amounts of capital to come forward, and the capital resides mostly in the capital markets. And the multilateral development banks are the most efficient vehicle to transfer capital from the markets into the needs of the emerging economies and developing countries. So the question is, are they doing that? Are they doing it efficiently? And if not, what can be done for them to effectively play that role? Because they were created for that purpose. After the Second World War, with the countries in Europe destroyed, that was the purpose of the multilateral development banks. And then they became, after reconstructing France, they became useful for the rest of the world, right? So that was the purpose. So our panel looked at the issue. We said, okay, we're going to throw away all the old ideas, and we're going to look at it from first principles, basic principles. And we came up with a set of 5 recommendations. Marc-Andre had 5 recommendations as well. 5 is the magic number. And we were looking at 15 multilateral development banks, including the World Bank, which is the largest one. And we found that, first of all, the reason why the multilateral development banks are not doing what they're supposed to do at that speed and at that scale is coming from their shareholders, the countries that own those banks, who tell them, yes, I want you to invest in development, but I don't want you to lose your AAA, and I don't want you ever to come to me to call on callable capital. So the MDBs are kind of strung, right? They have this mandate, but their shareholders are kind of holding the line. So our first recommendation is that the shareholders, who are the ones who appointed us, so it was a bit cocky for us to say that, should reinterpret the risk appetite of themselves and the instruction they give to the MDBs. Our second recommendation was on callable capital. The MDBs are unique creatures. If they didn't exist, we would have to create them because they have this very efficient structure where they have a small amount of paid-in capital and a huge amount of callable capital. But the callable capital is done in a way where it is never called. And our panel reviewed and looked at what would happen in such a way that capital would be called, and it's a very rare event. So we said, so why not take a small portion of that and use it to bring in more capital into those MDBs. And we found out that the Inter-American Development Bank is already doing it, and therefore this could be expanded to the other MDBs. Our third recommendation links a lot to what Marc-Andre just said, which is innovation. Said there are a lot of ways in which the MDBs can tap into the private sector, and we looked at examples and said, now how do you take this to scale? Guarantees, insurance. Why is MIGA only an insurer for the World Bank? It could be an insurer for all the MDBs. That's one of our recommendations. Our report is public, by the way, so you can see it. It's on the G20 website. You can find it on our website at Southbridge as well. And many other innovations, including hybrid capital, non-voting capital, where institutional investors, the private sector can invest in the MDBs for impact purposes, but they don't participate in the governance structure which the shareholders are very, very keen on keeping. And so that set of innovations could unlock a lot of potential. And then the fourth block of recommendations was around the credit rating agencies. was we said the credit rating agencies, they're very busy. They are rating thousands and thousands of commercial banks and a handful of MDBs. So the methodologies that they use are more fine-tuned for commercial banks than for MDBs. So our recommendation was that the rating agency should also look at their own methodologies and make adjustments. We're quite worried when we said that because, as you know, they're independent entities. So as soon as our report came out, Fitch came up with an opinion which was quite scary to the MDB, saying, if you go and implement these recommendations, you will be downgraded. But then S&P and Moody's came up with their opinions, and they both said, look, we expect the MDBs to do all, if not more than what is in the report, and we don't see anything in there that would cause a downgrade, and that we are willing to look at our methodology. So that was very encouraging to us. And our last recommendation was on data governance, and I think Marc-André already mentioned GEMS. GEMS is this database. It's a mine of beautiful information that the private sector would love to have its hands on to gauge risk, that the rating agencies would love to have their hands on to rate properly, but right now it's a private database only known to the MDBs. So we recommended that that get publicized and available, maybe with some cleaning of the data to issue statistics rather than actual data, because it has some sensitive market information. And then within that block of data governance, we also recommended an MDB financial forum, because the MDBs don't have a place where they go and talk to each other.
But they have a pavilion.
They have a pavilion, yes, but we are asking them to do more to kind of engage with each other. So that was the report, and I'm very grateful to the government of Italy who nominated us, the governments of France and South Korea who are the co-chairs of the International Financial Architecture Working Group, the government of Indonesia, who was the host for the G20 this year, and now the government of India is taking over for the presidency in the coming year. And they are all, it's the one report that has enjoyed success from 3 consecutive G20 presidencies. And that tells you how important the MDBs are.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.